Start my diary.
Item 7, which is appointing a proxy for the council to vote at the annual general meeting, which is a reasonably quick affair. I'm unable to attend, so in the recommendations we need to find another proxy to represent council at the AGM.
What time is that, sir?
So that's Friday 9 AM in this room. It'll be a short meeting. So
can the director?
I'm happy to be. I'll be here. I'll turn my phone off and be completely attentive.
Can the director be a proxy?
Right.
I guess he can.
yes. So all we need him to do is to vote to accept the annual accounts of HBRIC and appoint the auditor, which shouldn't take more than.
Agrees that the deputy chairman. We just put deputy in there, and we have a resolution.
I get all the privileges and benefits of the chairman. Well, hold that on.
Absolutely.
Would it be possible to have an alternate too, just in case he comes off
alternate
his
as well.
motorcycle on the way here?
Yeah. We do need an alternate as well. Is anyone else able to attend that AGM?
Yes, I can.
Thank you, Neil. Neil will be the alternate. Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Agrees that the deputy chair, we'll just add a deputy chair in there, and we'll add in that Councillor Curtin will be the alternate as well. They'll both attend. So with those additions to the recommendations, do we have a mover?
I'll move.
Moved by Rick.
Second it.
Second by Jeff. All those in favour?
All right.
Right, carried. We've got that little one out of the way. Right, good. Right, the draft Triennial agreement.
So, Chair, this is a draft for feedback. It has been developed in consultation with the mayors and governance teams and chief executives of the 5 councils. It's currently circulating around the 5 councils for feedback, and the idea would be that we'd bring that feedback back to the Mayoral Forum early in the new year and develop a penultimate version for taking to councils for adoption. Having said that, a couple of the councils have jumped the process somewhat and already adopted the Triennial agreement, but in discussion with them on Monday, they are more than happy to take a revised version back to their councils in the new year should there be items of amendment. One of those which was previously discussed by council was in relation to bilateral engagements, particularly pursuant to section 4.3 of the regional policy statement around working together on RMA matters, and there is the opportunity to add into here under the section 5 of this document, the protocols for communication and coordination, a particular reference to bilateral engagement between the regional council and territorial authorities on those, particularly on those regulatory matters of common interest. So that could be added in there as well. But otherwise, the intention today is to get feedback from council that we can then take back and incorporate into a revised version.
Right. Questions and comment, really? Rick?
Could someone give me the explanation for what I think the implications are for number 7?
So that's something which is required under the Local Government Act, that there is a statement in every triennial agreement in the country around regional councils, and its intention is to ensure that there's not duplication of activity between regional councils and territorial authorities, and therefore that there is a process of consultation undertaken so that if there are...
Thank you.
Yep.
Just I thought it might be that someone's trying to say that we're trying to spring a surprise on them. This is about us them stopping us springing a surprise on them. It's a requirement of act.
That's right.
Fair enough. Yep.
Any other questions?
Yeah. It's on the same issue. This is framed around section 16 of the Act, obviously, but what would be an example of a significant activity that this council might propose to commence that would be already undertaken? I mean, what sort of thing can you envisage that we might decide we want to do that the others already do?
So waste management's an example. It could be that the Regional Council decides to start a curbside recycling collection scheme, for example.
Good idea.
And that's something obviously where there is already activity undertaken by a territorial authority, and simply what this provides for is a mechanism whereby we would enter into a formal process to reconcile the two roles, and it could be the outcome of that is the territorial authority agrees to cease undertaking that activity, and the Regional Council picks it up.
Excellent.
That's helpful.
Maybe to move, Chair.
Neil's got a question.
Mr. Chair, just the focus of the document is substantially on, for example, at paragraph 7, the new activities proposed by the Regional Council and consultation in relation to regional policy statement, the next one. But there's nothing really that takes you to the local authorities' annual plan, long-term plans, strategic plans. How are those matters dealt with, or should they be a part of the Triennial agreement?
Certainly in terms of the district plans, there is a requirement for consultation. I'm going to, I'm not 100% sure of this, but I have a suspicion that for annual plans and long-term plans, there is a requirement in the Local Government Act for consultation with neighbouring councils. Does anyone know off the top of their head? Bronnie, do you know exactly whether that's the case or not? Is it explicitly so?
Not explicitly.
Right. It's certainly the common practice, and it certainly is our practice, and we all share annual plans and long-term plans and seek comment. But it's certainly something that could be strengthened in the Triennial agreement by way of more formal recognition of that.
Is it worth pursuing that some more with?
I think it's a good suggestion. Yeah. And I would doubt very much there would be any objection from any other councils in relation to that.
Just a couple of other things. There is a provision for dispute resolution being referred to, or disputes being referred to mediation. Has that scenario ever eventuated previously? I'm just wondering if that's a little bit over the top, or is it, you know, something that we need in an agreement of this kind? It's quite a legal. Can you give us a scenario where we might need to engage that?
Has been used?
No, it hasn't ever been used.
Yeah.
It's a requirement.
Yes, requirement under the Local Government Act that we have one.
Do we have a dispute resolution clause?
But it has not been used, so.
People just walk away.
But it could arise.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of a situation where it might. That was all. I know that there's provision in section 16 if the others object to a new activity that we undertake to carry on, that gets referred to mediation. But
These things require cooperation. If they don't cooperate, they don't work. I'm happy to move if you wish, Chair, but I would add one amendment to it. I see that item 3 in the recommendations doesn't actually have us adopting it. I'd like to put in, suggest a new 4, delegates authority to the Chair and the Chief Executive to finalise the agreement on these details. Finalise, sign off on the revised amended document, because we need something at the end to conclude it, don't we?
So the intention had been to bring back a finalised version of the new year for adoption. But
all right, if you're doing that.
Yep, but we could do it either way.
I'd prefer to see the new.
Okay, well, I'll move it as it is, and it comes back for adoption. Yep.
Okay, we have a mover. Seconder.
Second.
Seconder. Seconder Neil. Do you wish to speak any more, Rick?
No, thanks.
You, Neil? All those in favour?
Aye.
It's passed. Thank you. Now, item 9, Future Farming Trust.
So, Chair, this item is reasonably self-explanatory. Reappointment of the Council's trustee representative was made on the 27th of November. Subsequent to that, the appointee has resigned as the council appointee and been appointed by the trust at large, and so there is now a vacancy with respect to the council appointee that now needs to be filled. So, seeking a nomination from council.
Are there any questions on this?
email, which I don't think.
I've got some comments, but not questions.
Oh, your comments you can have in a second. So, do we move the recommendation to appoint? Well, I will move that we appoint Will Foley as our trustee as our representative to the Future Farming's Trust.
I'm happy. Sheriff
will second that. I have little to say on the matter except that Will be an exceptional representative for us on that trust, and I'm very pleased that we're able to appoint you. Well, Sheriff, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, maybe for the information of Will as well, is that personally I actually was very uncomfortable with the decision we made, personally made, and I'm really pleased with this particular outcome, and that's why I'm happy to nominate Will, and with the same sentiment as you have, Chair.
Right, Martin.
Yes, well, look, obviously I seconded Will's nomination last time. I don't believe the council was, I guess, fairly or completely or sufficiently briefed to make the decision last time. I didn't know that the clauses of the trust deed hadn't been brought to our attention, whereby the reason that it is a council appointment is a reflection of the funding contribution. And I think that if better explained to the council at the time, we may have had a majority in favour of Will previously. It is of concern to me that I understand a number of the trustees have resigned, including farmer trustees that would have been of great value to that trust for its future intent and purposes, and who would not be willing to go back. So that's a shame. I think this is a learning experience. We were under of the impression that there was pretty universal support for the previous appointment. So yes, just I guess my disquiet at the way this is played out, and the fact that we've had 3 resignations from Future Farming Trust. Moving forward, it is great that we will now have Will, if this motion is carried, representing this council on the trust for future purposes, so that's great.
Thank you, Martin. I thought to sort of clarify that you are going to accept the nomination, Will?
Yeah, yep.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers? Rick?
I'd just like, in light of the comments made, I was going to let it just go through as a pro forma, but in the light of the comments made, I do think that needs to be some counterbalance to this. Firstly, I have no doubts about my decision to support the previous candidate at all. I have no second thoughts about it. Secondly, I think the issue here for me is quite a simple one. The council reserves the right to itself to appoint who it wishes to be its representative on whatever body it is. That must be our sovereign right. To have others say that we are not entitled to appoint certain people and make the thing is unacceptable to me. Federated farmers choose who their representatives are, and whoever they turn up with, I will accept. If it's Ngāti Kahungunu choose their representative, they turn up in front of us, I will accept them. I do not believe this council has the right to drive into other organisations to say who is acceptable and who is not. The representatives of have to be accepted as who they are, and who this council chooses is our choice. And I will never accept anybody else being able to push themselves into our organisation to say who's good enough or not. Never. So that's my position. I'm very militant on that, and I'll never budge.
Thank you, Rick. Are there any other speakers before we put the motion?
Am I allowed to talk this time, Chair?
Yeah, no, you can. The floor is yours, Will.
Yeah, so, I mean, based on the previous process and vote, I'm certainly not holding, anyone or against, what went down at that stage. With what's happened, it's obviously very disappointing, and so there's going to be a bit of work to do to, I guess, restore that trust now, to restore some credibility, integrity out to the farming public. So I guess I take that on board, and yeah, going forward, look, we're due to hear from some farmers this afternoon. They do need help. The Future Farming Trust, it's not a big beast, it's not going to be able to solve everything, but yeah, I'd like to think it goes some way towards helping issues that our farmers have out there with dealing with some of these regulations. So that's my intent. Obviously need to get stuck in and see where the rest of the trust sits, but yeah, looking forward to it, and I'll certainly look forward to reporting back to you as the council and what we can achieve in that space.
Thank you, Will, and thank you, everybody. With that, we'll move the recommendation. We'll move in a second. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you very much, councillors. So, affixing the common seal.
I'm happy to move that you
Goodness, we've got Rick here.
fix the common seal with the due ceremony.
Just
Chair.
before we do accept Rick's move, has anyone got any questions around affixing the common seal? No questions? Therefore, we'll accept Rick's moving. And do we have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Seconder Martin. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you very much, Rick. The Māori Committee, item 11. Right, we're shooting through today.
Pass to Pity on this one.
Finished 10 minutes ago.
Kia ora all. Just a slight mishap at the last previous Triennial meeting of the Māori Committee, that it did not, in its discussions, move to make a recommendation that could have been carried through into council business for this Triennial. One of the discussions that happened at that last Māori Committee was to push for each of the kai whenua, who each hold 3 positions on the committee, was to push them to look at how representative their constituency was. And there was a hope there that sort of moving through the Regional Planning Committee, that there might have been some options for the PSGEs to be also represented in that. Whilst that was the intention, there was a bit of pushback online from at least one of the tai whenua. And so they've come back to me, and that's 2 of them who have come back and indicated that they wish for status quo in terms of the terms of reference and also in terms of the membership. The other 2 haven't come back to me. So what the paper that you can take as read this morning indicates to move with that, but at the first meeting, which is in February, the Māori Standing Committee, to look through the membership, through the terms of reference, and to make a recommendation back to council. So, Chair, if I could pass back to you in terms of the recommendations that sit in the paper, that's a summary, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Paddy? Just this, I have one. The list of names. Teresa's no longer there. Is she nominated by that tai whenua? She's never turned up.
No, the 3 are as they are from Wairua.
Okay.
Well, there's one point I might make note of, Chair. In all the previous terms of reference, there has been provision for 3 elected councillors on the Māori Committee.
Yes.
And I haven't been able to find any amendments to that indicated 4. Whereas on the 6th of November, Council did propose 4 elected members of Council.
The point I'd make to you there is that whatever the rules say, there's a thing called custom and practice. And custom and practice has been for a long time to elect 4.
It has been 4, yeah.
It's never been challenged. Everybody's, no one's ever. You're very smart to have read the rules. No one else has ever done it.
No. I think just for new councillors, I'd like to give a little bit of brief on the Māori Committee. It's been here for a long time, and it comes out of the tai whenua structure, which of course the tai whenua Marais to tai whenua to Niki, before there was any treaty settlements in right through our Ruhi. So there's a little bit of a juggling going on, and that's been the construct that I've known all my life here, and certainly my time on the council. So Paddy alluded to, there's a little bit of a issue going on about whether the, and of course we see that at the RPC, where they need to get a little bit more involved. And so we were hoping that that could be figured out at Tana Te Whenua level, but and Perry alluded to that as well, but it hasn't been. So, and there's two Tai Whenua that are very active in keeping the Māori committee. I just have to say that I really enjoy my participation there. It's grassroots, so it tends to be, we do tend to move around and go to the regions and out to Marae, and we do get a hiding from people there, and it's good. It really is grassroots, and you get people who live by the streams talking about their stream to you. So it's very good. I think it's very good for councillors, and maybe we've creeped into 4. I'd be happy if other councillors turned up, and I think it's they'd find it particularly rewarding. It's a good committee. So here it is. I guess, are we saying we're going to keep the 20 in the recommendation for that?
I think the recommendation is this committee confirms the terms of reference for proposal to the Māori Committee for confirmation at its first meeting of the Triennial.
Okay. So, do we have any other questions?
Yes, there are some.
Yes, Neil?
Mr. Chair, I wonder whether Paddy could just help me with the construct of the committee. Firstly, the terms of reference specify 4 representatives from each of the Tai Whenua executives.
It's actually 3, but each has a proxy in case one isn't there.
Okay. So three
standing
plus
representatives.
3 plus a proxy.
And then there's a proxy in
Sure.
case one isn't able to make it.
Can you help me with the notion of kaumatua as a part of that, please?
Yeah, so for each of the Tai Whenua, they have an option to have a kaumatua representative, which is one of their elders at their choice.
So the Tai Whenua in each area choose a kaumatua as well as one of their executive. Is that what you're saying?
And one Tai Whenua member.
Sure.
So that's 3, plus a proxy in case one can't make it.
And in terms of the Tai Whenua itself, can you describe the processes by which the executives are formed, nominated, voted? What is their internal democratic process or process?
Given I've never been permitted to be part of those discussions in any of the Tai Whenua, each one of them runs a different process. Some of them are quite formal, such as Wairoa Tai Whenua.
Hiratonga is quite formal.
Hiratonga as well. Te Whanganui o Orotu is still, what's the word, it might be resurrecting itself. So I'm unaware as to what process they will use. Tamatea has a very small base. And I'm well aware that 2 of those are not that well. That's Brian Gregory, and there's one other down there, Paula Shasha, Cecia. He's not well either. So it'll be an interesting first meeting as to the capacity of each of those.
Mr. Chair, just for the sake of clarity in terms of are the Tai Whenua members representative of the broad population in their rohi, or are they from the marae or hapu? How does that construct? What's their construct?
So I'll answer that in terms of, they're all different, as you said, but Hiratonga, they meet every month. Every marae has a representative who goes to the meeting. So every marae in that Hiratonga Tai Whenua area, and they elect the people that will come on to this. So it's very similar to, it's a very democratic process in those big ones. I think there's 2 very small Tai Whenua that are still building their base, but Wairua, I imagine, would be the same.
Could I just add a real life sort of scenario to that, Councillor Curtin? So for the Tai Whenua for Te Whanganui a Rotu, each of the representatives that sit on that Tai Whenua are elected by their marae through a hui a hapu meeting, where those who attended nominate their representative from their marae to sit on the Tai Whenua. and for Waiōhiki Marae we've chaired Tariha. So they're voted in informal meetings with minutes, with a vote, that then allow them to sit as a representative of their marae on the tai whenua.
That's a wonderful picture to create. Just in terms of the comparison with the RPC, I'm just interested to know whether we're talking a similar constituency, and it seems to me that the tai whenua construct is a robust one. And what is the difference, though, with the RPC?
It's going to be an argument both ways. So the two constructs we have in this environ is you have PSGEs, which have a settlement act in behind them, and you have the tai whenua, who emerged off the back of the fisheries settlement. And they're both competing in the same space in some respect, but one is much, much older, and that's the tai whenua base. That was my question posed back in August, was to just test in terms of the Māori committee as to how representative they were across all parts in terms of Māoridom within each of those. And they're not ready to, I don't think we should give up on that in terms of pushing or testing that representation moving forward. But that's the construct as it exists at the moment. In the future, it relies really upon some convergence of leadership discussion at the top end between PSGEs and tai whenua to evolve what the future of representation of Māori might look like going forward. That's a bigger discussion.
That's right. Mr. Chair, if I could indulge a little more, and my colleague Hinaway Ormsby may be able to help me here. I'm seeing that we need to treat both entities, the Māori Committee and the RPC, similarly or the same in terms of status around the council. What have you got a view in a way as to?
I think so. I mean, the Māori Standing Committee will give us quite specific and valued information about their catchment in Rohe, because they still live and breathe and live there. Whereas the RPC, yes, they may, but they have a slightly different role in terms of their treaty settlement and cultural redress for probably a larger area than those marae-based areas. So I think they're still very important, both of them. They deal at slightly different levels, but just as important in terms of the value and knowledge they bring back to us at the council here.
But we just need to clarify that's all exactly correct. But in status, they are quite different, because one has rights in statute and the other one is an advisory committee. So they're quite different, really. Yes.
Just some observations and a couple of questions. Yeah, like I totally endorse the model as a way of ensuring that this council is informed from the grassroots up. I think it's a great structure and opportunity to continue. I do recall Peter Paku at the last meeting of the RPC raising an issue which vexed me a little, which Perry, you may be able to help me with, that the tank consultation had been with the tai whenua and not with the PSGEs, and I was a little unclear as to the significance of the distinction, so maybe that's something that we could be assisted with. That doesn't need to be now, but I'm just juggling that round in my mind. I just got the distinction that where that had gone off the rails is that the consultation was at tai whenua level, not with PSGE. I heard Peter say that. So that was, I don't know, I'm just reflecting back, something that I heard that I need to understand better. The second issue is a very more minor one in context, possibly. How have these terms of reference changed from the previous version, if at all? And I note that there is train spotting, there is a duplication clauses 9 to 22, duplicated at clauses 24 to 27. So you could delete one of those if that would assist. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair, just to help clarify one thing. The first question raised by Councillor Williams is about timing.
That's right.
The tank process started well ahead of the treaty settlement process.
Right.
and it was the Taifena were the existing structures at the time, so the council sensibly engaged with the Taifena.
Yes.
And on every level I thought that was a good thing to do. Subsequent to that, the RPC was formed on the basis of 2 settlements that had come through as a part of the treaty settlement process. So there was an overlap. So at the time that the tank process had started, the Regional Planning Committee did not exist.
Yes, thank you. There was nothing loaded about the question.
No, I'm just giving an explanation about that. That was the problem of it. So people can point to it as a problem, but it was a problem that the council could not have foreseen or solved.
Do we have a move for these recommendations? It's basically that we are accepting the...
I'll move.
Well, I was just going to get, perhaps Perry could answer my question. How have they changed from previous terms of reference?
Basically the same.
Yes, this one here, we've actually, Leanne, you're in a better position. We've merged the charter and the terms of reference into this.
So they're exactly what was in the charter and terms of reference adopted at the end of October, I think 2017. I've just combined the two so that we've got one document. That's all.
Thank you.
Okay with that? Rick, did you move the recommendations?
I did.
Did you have a seconder? Anyway, were you seconded? Seconded. Anyway, do you want to speak, Rick? Anyway?
Mr.
Any other speakers?
Well, yes, Monsieur, I do want to comment, having sat on the committee and been around it for a number of, well, actually a couple of decades now, and I regard the Māori Committee as an essential part of the Council's activities, and it's played an important role. It stood the test of time. It really does get to flax roots, and it's important for us to continue to acknowledge the committee. The thing that we need to work on, I'd suggest, over the time of this council is to resolve how we might approach issues such as consultation on a plan change. We'll with the wisdom of council prior to tank, there was no option, but any future consultations will involve consideration of Māori representation, whether that's with the RPC or whether that's with the Māori Committee or Taifenua, is something we need to turn our minds to so that we don't in some way diminish the role of the Māori Committee.
Thank you, Neil. Any other speakers? We'll move in a second. All those in favour? Aye.
Aye.
Against? It's carried. Now we will move to the next item, which is Napier Port. Well, Alistair, welcome to you and your team. Todd Kristen. So do you want to come up and... Okay. Well, thank you guys for coming and reporting to the council. It was one of the things which we discussed before we did the IPO. And congratulations. Who do I congratulate? The chair or the chief executive on,
the chief executive claims all the credit.
No, but there's a rule, Alistair. The chief executive does all the work and the chair gets all the glory. So congratulations, you've done. You're really moving along to budget. It's been a great success, the IPO. It just showed that the public in Hawke's Bay embraced it, the public nationally embraced it, and we're currently stars, and we want to stay as stars. So the floor is yours on that.
Thank you. Do you want to just... You have to read that important notice and disclaimer very quickly. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to present the 2019 financial results. I'm Alistair McLeod, for those of you I haven't yet had the opportunity to meet. With me is Todd Dawson, our Chief Executive, and Kristen Lee, our Chief Financial Officer. And since we last briefed the Council, there has been a an election and a change of councillors, so we're looking forward to having certainly all of the new councillors and hopefully all of you come and visit us at the port. We're very keen to do that as soon as we can, just so you get a sense of what's happening down there. The presentation we're going to give is substantially the same as we've given to investors in New Zealand and Australia. And there's a small amount of additional material because it's material that's become public since we did the roadshow. But I am going to say now that there will be areas where you may well have questions that we will not be able to answer today. So I'm just going to apologise in advance for that. We are very restricted in what we can say other than stuff that has already been notified to the market. Roll forward one. So,
question, in what way are you restricted?
if it hasn't been notified to the market, we can't, given this is a public meeting, we can't disclose it now, so we have to notify the market in advance of telling anyone, particularly a major shareholder. Since we last talked to the council, we've gone from having one shareholder to over 9,000. It does mean that the annual general meetings, which I've presided over for some time, I used to pride myself on how quickly I could get through them, and 13 minutes was the record. That's going to be significantly different from here on. The port, it's clearly, it's a long-term infrastructural asset, and it's an asset that has a very symbiotic relationship with the region. So when the region does well, the port does well, and when the port is well positioned for growth, the region can do well. We're very proud of the fact that we provide efficient access to global markets for the food and fibre products that we grow here. And we're increasingly focusing on being able to provide a better gateway for imports. We have a lot of empty boxes that come in. We'd love to see that better used. The financial results that we've reported show that we've made a good start as a publicly listed company. And it'd be fair to say that the reaction from the investors around Australasia has been almost overwhelmingly positive. I may digress very slightly. The one negative meeting we had with an investor in Australia, he was quite hostile. And Kristen, partway through the discussion, suddenly went, you sold all your shares. So he was really quite grumpy because he'd sold. And I think that was the only grump that we had.
Seller's remorse, I think we call it.
Yes, yeah. He lightened up a bit after that, but it was interesting. We're obviously looking forward to making a start on Sixth Wharf. Sixth Wharf is a pivotal project for the future of Napier Port and indeed the future of export from Hawke's Bay. We now have the balance sheet to support that growth, and we're in probably the best position we've ever been. And so the focus for us in the coming year and years is getting Sixth Wharf built, delivering on our business plan, integrating sustainability into everything that we do in a more structured and formal way. We already do a lot, but we're now taking a more structured approach to that, and we're going to continue to invest in our people. So to go through the detail, I might as well hand the microphone over to the person who claims all the credit anyway. So, Todd, over to you.
Thank you, Alistair. What I thought I'd do is just give you a bit of for some of the new people in the room as well that may not be as familiar with the port, given a lot of the existing councillors have had quite a lot to do with the port over the last couple of years. A bit of an oversight of actually what we do and what we're all about. So at the port we like to describe ourselves as agile and resilient. Good words, but effectively what we mean is that we've stood the test of time for the Hawke's Bay. We've been around for over nearly 100, or just on 150 odd years, serving the Hawke's Bay region, and we describe ourselves as agile and resilient because of the nature of our port and what we do. There's a real diversified mix of operations at the port. We have 5 wharfs today, all inventively named: 1 wharf, 2 wharf, 3 wharf, 4 wharf, and 5 wharf. And no prizes for what the next one might be called, which is 6 wharf, of course. We operate a port which is a mobile harbour crane port, as opposed to some of the other ports that you may see around New Zealand or indeed the world, where they have gantry operations. We have a mobile harbour crane port, which means that those mobile harbour cranes can actually be mobile and move around. And as the seasonal profile of the port changes throughout the year, we can adapt our operation to suit and use, for example, Four Wharf, as we sit here today, is predominantly being used to load bulk or logs and fertiliser and things, but during the peak of the apple season, for example, we may turn that back into a container operation and use our cranes on Four Wharf to load containers on and off ships. We're a breakwater port as well, so that means that the port is not inside a natural enclosed harbour. It's exposed to the sea, the swell and wind conditions that can come. So our most valuable asset is really the breakwater that surrounds the port, that also means that for vessels coming in and going, they need to turn inside that breakwater to come in and out of the harbour safely and be positioned onto the wharfs. What we're experiencing at the port is that lovely problem we've all got, which is the growth coming out of Hawke's Bay. And that growth means we've got more and more cargo coming, but also more and more ships coming to take that cargo away, which means that we're running out of parking spaces, and you would have hopefully heard this story many times. At the port we are experiencing congestion, which means we have to move ships in and out of the port on a regular basis to be able to bring other ones in, because also the ships coming are getting bigger as well. And so that's our issue that we've been facing, and that's why we've been through the process that we've been through, to make sure that the port, as Alistair says, symbiotic relationship between the port and the region, make sure that the port can continue to serve the region, is in good shape to do so, and because the region's doing well, the port will also do well. So we also have a number of other assets around the port, lots of different tenants on the port as well, so we lease facilities to different tenants on the port, whether that be cement, whether that be fertiliser, tallow, bitumen, etc. A number of the different stevedores operate on the site, so we are a landlord as well as a port operator. Any one time there can be 400, 500 people working on the port, of which around about 270, 280 odd those people will be Napier Port employees. So she's a big and complex operation. We have a couple of off-sites as well. Located 4 or 5 kilometres down the road, we have Thames Street, which is our empty container yard. There's about 11, 12 hectares there, and we also have a piece of land in Whakatū for future development, which is right between TNG and the Whakatū cool stores, about 12.5 hectares there, which is road and rail linked. So yeah, she's an interesting and dynamic place, and we'd love to have you down to have a bit of a visit at some stage as well and show you around. In terms of our strategic direction, so last about 18 months ago, we took the opportunity to really relook at the port's strategic direction and ask the question as to why does our port exist? And it might seem obvious why our port exists, but in the context of Napier Port, our port really exists to support this region and make it thrive and connect it to the world. And so we did a lot of work, including with the existing shareholder, the regional council, customers, our people, our community, etc., really fleshing out the detail of what our purpose was, and that's the words that we came up with. And it was a really interesting process, because we engaged with a lot of people throughout that and asked them, what do you think the purpose of the port is? And almost universally, everybody came back with the same theme. Slightly different nuances of the words, but pretty much the same theme. And so we've landed on those words: together we build a thriving region by connecting you to the world. Off the back of that, we then worked out, well, what are the 4 key focus areas that we want to drill in on, and that should direct and guide our activities going forward. One of them was around building much closer customer connections. It's really important to understand what we're really good at operating a port, but actually, are we operating the port the way that our customers want us to operate the port and provide the services that they need? So we want to get much closer to our customers and understand what are their needs for today, but also into the future, because that's also important for us to understand what sort of infrastructure and network of infrastructure do we need to build and think about for the future as well. And so that's one of the other themes there: networked infrastructure. We make sure that the port is well connected into the New Zealand supply chain, whether that's be our customers' warehouses, the road and rail networks, the shipping networks, etc., that operate throughout New Zealand. Harnessing data and technology is another key theme. Any business that's not doing this these days is probably blind to what's going on around them. But we really focus on this area in the port internally, but equally it's becoming more important for us externally. The port captures a lot of data about our own business, but also our customers' businesses. And so we're looking to utilise that and our technology to be able to get better information about how we improve the efficiency of our own port, but also the efficiency of our customers' supply chains as well. And also we've actually been pretty damn good in terms of, as a regional port, of making some unique developments within the technology space that others are interested in as well. So this could be a potential area for the port in the future to develop new revenue streams outside of just being operation of a port. And then building collaborative partnerships. This is something that's really important to us. It's about working with people that want to achieve the same types of goals as we have, which is, again, going back to our purpose, making this region thrive, and also recognising that we can't be everything to everybody, that there's good people that we can partner with out there, and go and focus on working with those people that want to do business the way that we do, and spending our time and energy in those spaces. Plus also the collaborative relationships we need to build with our community, and social licence is becoming a major issue for ports in New Zealand, but also globally to be really cognizant of. So it's a big feature within our strategy as well, as around building and forming collaborative partnerships. And of course the foundation, recognising there's 150 years of history at our port, the foundation is around the culture and the culture of care that we have at Napier Port, recognising the value of the people inside the port and what they've done and what they've established. A lot of other port CEOs talk to me about the fact that they've got all this, in previous times, they've got a very strong balance sheet, they've got all the flash equipment in the world, etc., and but they really struggle with the fact that their culture and their people aren't right. We're almost been the opposite way around. We've had a great culture, great people, and not the balance sheet and the equipment and things to actually be able to deliver what we want to deliver. We're now in a very fortunate position after the last 18 months, 2 years, to be in the sweet spot where we think we've got a great culture, great people, and we've also got the balance sheet to be able to do some good stuff with the kit that we're going to have in the future. I know which way I'd rather have it round, which is have the great people and culture to be able to do and actually utilise that cool equipment that we're going to have in the future. So other ports look on us with a bit of envy in that regard. So it's just a bit of an overview of our strategy. That strategy then forms the basis of direction of travel that we take. We've now got a 10-year roadmap of activity, but it all links back through those 4 key focus areas and back to that unifying purpose. In terms of some of the key business strengths, we talked to the market about we are that essential infrastructure asset in Hawke's Bay that the Hawke's Bay relies on in terms of getting its produce to global markets. We are in a region that's seeing some nice strong growth, and all those indicators that you look at, as you're well aware, being councillors in this region are on the upwards tick, so that's really pleasing, and it's a really good base for the port. Also have very good long-term strong relationships with a lot of our key customers. The port does have a really nice diversified trade portfolio. It is fairly dominated by the food and fibre sector, but it equally has a lot of spread of other kinds of commodities going through it. So I like to describe it as we're not a one-trick pony in terms of that regard. We're very well positioned for future cargo growth and visibility of that cargo growth. So we know how many trees are in the ground. We can go out and touch and feel them, whether that be pine trees or apple trees or what have you. We know what sort of stock units are on farms. We stay very, very close to our customers' understanding of what sort of trade flows to expect that they're coming to the port. So that's good. And of course, importantly, we are fully consented to be able to develop and grow, which again, I point to the fact that a lot of other ports in the country are struggling in this area. Very strong historical performance, as you would have well know and enjoyed over the years from the port, and a good record of execution around those growth opportunities we've identified previously. And of course, we've got a very good management team and team right across the port in terms of being able to run our operation. So those are the sort of 6 key strengths we talked to a lot of the other investors about, and that I think have resonated with them, and hence why we're seeing good, strong demand for us. Sorry, just going backwards, but going forwards, some of the highlights for this year that's just gone by: 5.5 million tonnes of cargo, 687 ship calls. Really pleasingly, throughout the shareholder through the IPO, we've achieved 9,000 new shareholders, as Alistair mentioned, but 97% of our people and team in the port are now shareholders as well. Just shy of $100 million. We didn't quite make $100 million this year, but just shy of $100 million, which was up 8.6% on the previous year. We declared a dividend of $5 million a share and 2.5 cents a share. But I think more importantly, some of the other features of our result over the last year, we've also, we've added additional experience into our management team. We've delivered a lot of other infrastructure projects throughout the port as well. We've continued to develop our people and culture, and we've also invested a hell of a lot in and around maintaining our strong social licence that we have in the port. And that's been demonstrated by the fact that we've been able to retain or get a resource consent uncontested in terms of our development aspirations. Again, that's pretty unique in the New Zealand sense for ports. And we saw strong demand from locals for the ownership via the IPO. And again, we also worked hard with a lot of the local iwi, and now have 4 local iwi on board as investors in the port too. And that's a growing and fostered relationship that we're developing. So for us, the fact that we've been able to go through what we've done and retain a strong social licence has been a great outcome. Just in terms, I spoke about the platform for growth. Sixth Wharf is really that platform which is the key feature. So as I said, we are fully resource consented for that. We've just recently, in the last month or so, signed the contract with HEB for the construction of Sixth Wharf. Very pleasingly, in signing that contract, we've been able to sign that, locking in a number of the risk items that were outstanding at the time of going to the IPO. And the estimates have come in right on where we believe they should be. So that's really nice result. And also the fact that we're now due to start an anger construction in January in the new year. So right here and now we have site offices and areas being cleared on the port, ready for the construction to begin from January onwards.
Just could you tell us about HEB, Todd?
Yep.
Explain.
So HEB is a major marine or a major construction company here based locally in New Zealand. They're probably the preeminent construction company for marine type construction. Having done a lot of other ports throughout New Zealand. They've done Port Otago, they've done a lot of the work at reconstructing Littleton. They're currently up in Auckland doing the Viaduct Basin. They've done other work in Tauranga, etc. We went through quite an extensive process of selecting HEB, looking at others, but what made them stand out really was the fact that, one, how they operate in terms of their willingness to work with us around an early contractor involvement model, but two, their experience and track record. And the fact that they're local and able to mobilise the equipment that's required for this kind of construction job without having to bring it in from offshore, and the people and things as well. So we're pretty comfortable with them.
Sorry, supplementary to that, local subcontract involvement?
They will be sourcing some local subcontractors to support areas as well, yes. Yep. And of course, I think one of the other things, the fact that we've gone through the IPO obviously gives us the balance sheet that we need to be able to go through something like this. Other things that have been highlights and give us a good platform for growth as well, and I'll talk a bit more about it later on in the presentation, but we've done a master plan as well, which gives us a 30-year view of what sort of trade, etc., and infrastructure requirements the port's going to need. We've also launched a number of strategic projects throughout the year and driven a whole bunch of new technology initiatives throughout the port this year as well, which is driving new efficiencies inside the port as well as delivering efficiencies for our customers, particularly with the shipping lines. I'm just going to hand over to Kristen, who's going to run you through some of the numbers.
Thanks, Todd. Good morning, everybody. The strong sort of regional growth, sustained growth that Todd mentioned has seen the port growing in volume terms for a good period now. And this was continued into our 2019 financial year with some significant records continued to be set. So in the current year, we had a record total of 5.5 million tonnes, which was up 7% on the year before. And a lot of the growth in that, I guess you'll be well aware, is around fibre and particularly logs. We set another record in terms of throughput through the port for raw logs of 2.6 million tonnes, which was up 17% on the year before. And that follows a couple of years of 35% type growth. So that's definitely an ongoing trend that we're seeing at the port and having a significant impact on our overall volume and financial performance. Good strong performance through our on-port packing facility at Port Pack, so 50,000 TEUs, not quite a record, but it's a real strategic asset as far as our offering to customers. Another sort of noteworthy thing on the container side, whilst it's not records, because you'll recall we responded to the post-Kaikoura volume, which gave us a greater total, but continued strong growth in the pip fruit and meat areas, and particularly pip fruit, which is obviously pleasing to see, because we've seen, as we look around the region, obviously the horticultural conversions and replantings, etc. So we actually start to see that in terms of actual physical volumes coming through the port, and obviously the marketing side of it, price side of it, was continues to be strong. Cruise continues to grow. We had 70 cruise calls in the last season, which was up 13. It's a relatively small proportion of our overall revenue, but growing very quickly, and to be fair, of interest to sort of the investor community as one of our growth areas. The season that's underway now, we're expecting that to continue with 87 calls, but it continues to be a growing revenue area for us. And you may be aware, in terms of NZ Stats, Statistics New Zealand reporting that the year to June 30, $28 million was spent in the region by cruise lines and passengers. In terms of financials, so Todd mentioned that it's just shy of $100 million, which is just under 9% year-on-year growth, very healthy in any measure for an infrastructure asset. Our net profit after deduction of all costs without any adjustments was 6.8 million, which was quite a bit down on previous years, but that was obviously the, IPO costs and debt restructuring as part of the whole IPO process, in terms of bringing the proceeds in, repaying the banks, clearing out our interest rate swaps, and basically restructuring our finances so that we're in this sort of very strong go-forward position. On a pro forma basis, that was well up around 19.8 million, which was up on the year before. Within that, we're generating very strong returns at sort of a cash flow level. So EBITDA, earnings before interest, tax, and depreciation, amortization is a key measure that continues to grow strongly, and a key driver of value in the business. In terms of dividends, so we're due to pay the dividend on Friday, 2.5 cents per share, fully imputed, and that's basically as forecast in the PDS process or product disclosure statement forecasts. To you, Todd.
So just thought we'd just also give you a bit of a view as to what we're looking at going forward, in terms of some of the key features that are happening around the port at the moment as well. So I spoke earlier about our master plan. So as part of the IPO, we needed to do quite a lot of due diligence on the port, and make sure that we really understood every single little detail of the operation, our customers' businesses, what sort of trade we were expecting, the state of the assets, etc., so that we could present a really well-informed view to investors potentially coming in. So it was nice timing to be able to also go through this master plan process that we did, and that was an extensive process which took us through working with a number of external parties, and also in consultation with a lot of our community, our customers, be they cargo owners or shipping lines, etc., as to what we should be expecting in the next 30 years. Now, the port has never really had a fully informed 30-year master plan like this before, so it's quite a milestone for the port to do this, and it gives us really good, strong basis from which to plan from around our infrastructure investments in particular going forward. The pleasing thing through this process as well is it absolutely validated the need for the port to build Sixth Wharf, and also highlighted that as a port today, the utilisation of our wharfs are well in excess of what you'd expect to see on an international basis for ports to be operating. So the timing is good for us to be going into this sort of construction phase. What it also said to us is that, based on the information we can glean from the markets and the shipping lines, etc., of what we're looking at, Sixth Wharf will meet the needs of the port and the region for a long time into the future. But it also said to us that we also have options if we needed to develop further inside the port, if growth trajectories aren't quite spot on. So if it goes higher than what we expect, then there are also other options within the port, as well as the off-port land holdings that we have to support that. It also looked at things like how do we utilise rail further into the port as well. So it's given us good insight. Now that document is finished and was launched in the last couple of weeks into the public domain for further consultation and feedback, and we'll be looking at that and also working with local councils, regional council around the outcomes of that master plan document. I'm pretty excited about this one. We've got a new tugboat in the last couple of months. Now, the port today has a profile where we have 2 working tugboats, and we've just received delivery of Hawke, our 3rd tugboat. Today, the port, over 80% of our shipping requires 2 tugboats. As if you had anything to do with marine vessels and things, you'll know that they require a lot of maintenance, and there's always a risk that things can break down. So that's a risk that we don't really want to bear, is to go down to 1 tugboat and be anywhere from 5 to 4 or 5 weeks out from being able to have a backup option. So the 3rd tugboat becomes a risk mitigation, both from a resilience in terms of having that backup tug, but equally it also gives us a whole bunch of new capability we didn't have before once it comes fully on stream, which will be in the next couple of months as it's bedded into the operation, to be able to handle ships much more safely inside the harbour, be able to manoeuvre them at all sorts of different times of day, especially the bigger vessels which today are restricted to daylight hours. So it will improve the availability of our existing wharfs in lieu of 6th Wharf coming on. It also gives the team time to practice around using 3 tugs, which was always going to be a requirement when we brought 6th Wharf into operation as well. So it's been a fantastic early investment for us to make in terms of risk mitigation, improving the resilience I talked about before about the port, to get us through until that time when we've got 6th Wharf coming on, and just a whole uplift in terms of capability for the region as well, to be able to continue to serve the region. So we're pretty excited about that. It's a great vessel. Also, just on Hawke, we did a lot of work as well with the local iwi around the naming of that, and got great support from them in terms of the naming, and we had that launching ceremony about a month ago, which was really nice. Thames 2. So for some time we've had two sites down at Thames Street, down in Ahuriri, Pandora area, a couple of kilometres down the road from the port, and that Thames 2 facility is now close to being completed. It's due to be opened in January, February. What we're doing is we're taking a number of activities from off the terminal itself, which is mainly our pre-trip and wash facilities for empty containers, as well as a number of other smaller activities, and relocating that down to Thames Street, which has always been part of the plan, but equally as construction starts, it frees up space on the terminal which will be used for construction activities, and we're pretty excited about that being a new facility, fully tar sealed, so it's a nice environmental outcome as well for a container yard in that area, to be able to serve the local export market with a good supply of empty containers. So that's due to start basically from about January, February onwards. 6th Wharf has been talked about a lot, and I've already touched on that it's we've signed the contract and run away in January. The reason for it is around congestion. I've talked about the fact that we are a breakwater port, having to turn vessels inside the port, but 6th Wharf will now enable us to handle pretty much anything we think is going to be coming to New Zealand in terms of ship sizes in the future, as well as free up the availability of all our other wharfs to continue to handle the other types of cargo that's coming and going from the port, as well as manage the growing the cruise trade as well during those summer months. So we're pretty excited about that. It'll be 350 metres long along that northern edge of the port. We will be taking a lot of the rock revetment wall off there and taking that out and forming a new natural reef, which we've also received consent for just recently, and you would have seen hopefully some publication about that in the last week or so, which will be a great boost for local recreational fishing and the marine environment locally as well. Again, a real collaborative effort working around our social licence as well in the Hawke's Bay. Yeah, so she's all go basically, and we'll be due to complete mid to late 22.
Thank you, guys. Questions?
One more slide for you, Rex.
Oh,
yeah.
You hadn't finished?
Yeah, I haven't finished yet.
You sort of paused and
Let's take a breath. There's so much going on at the port. We've got so much to tell you. So get one opportunity. Just in terms of CapEx, you'll see there from the chart, you know, we've spent a lot of CapEx this year. The port sort of averages in the region of sort of 15 to 20 million annually anyway. This year we've sort of hit those sort of numbers. We actually fell a little bit short in terms of what we planned to spend. That will still be spent, it's just a timing impact. But you can see as we go into Sixth Wharf, the profile of spend jumps up significantly as we start that project. And there's just some pictures of some of the stuff that we've spent money on this year around Thames Street. I've talked about improving the lighting around the port with LEDs and things like that going in, the regular dredging and maintenance program that we have at the port, and just re-enhancing different facilities around the place. Sustainability.
You had 2 more.
He's got 3 or 4 more. He's still going.
Still more. I'll make these ones quick. One of the things that we are focused on, as I mentioned, is around sustainability. For us at the port, that's a much more holistic topic. And we've gone down a process this year of selecting the UN SDG framework in which to guide our strategy for the future in this space. The port, pleasingly, is doing a lot of things in this area, but this will be the framework that we're looking to align ourselves and looking at thinking globally but acting on a regional, local basis as to what the port can affect and change around a sustainable basis, and working with the likes of the regional councils and other councils and major corporates in the region to try and also achieve, get some alignment about an approach on this stuff. Health and safety. I guess one blemish that we have had this year on the back of a pretty successful year has been there's been a few 2 or 3 serious incidents on the port. We've had a number of people injured, and in 2 cases permanently injured, and so that's something that's been a bit of a wake-up call for us. We've been traditionally pretty proud of the health and safety track record of the port, and it's been held up as a very good example in the industry. But this has been a wake-up call, and again we'll be doubling down our efforts in the next year or so around prioritising focus around critical risk areas, adding additional investment and resources into health and safety, and a big focus also on removing people from harm's way through putting in place engineered solutions rather than administrative controls, which has been a key feature of where we feel like we've fallen over a little bit. So this will be an area of big focus for us in the future, and it's something we won't compromise on.
And just to add to that, a comment I've made to all of the investors that we've talked to, the board is absolutely determined that we will never put profit ahead of people. So if it impacts our results financially but protects the staff, that's a price we're going to pay. So, and I have to say the response, particularly from the Australian investors, was overwhelmingly positive. They were really focused on the sustainable development goals and the health and safety.
Lastly, just talking about investing in our people, and I talked about the fact that that's the big point of difference for our port is the culture within the port, and it's something that we'll continue to do. We've done a lot of stuff this year, and it's something that we'll keep investing in is around that cultural aspects and make sure that the team are well trained, well supported, and that we maintain that really good positive environment that we have at the port that allows us to do all the neat things that we do. So, yeah, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. It was a very excellent presentation. Do we have any questions? Just mindful that we have a cup of tea.
I'm mindful of the cup of tea as well. Thank you. I'll try and be brief, but thank you, Todd, Alistair, and Kristen, for that really helpful presentation, particularly for the benefit of the new councillors. Just wearing my Transport Committee hat, one of the, I guess, the victim of success issue is the throughput transport to and from the port. Have you got any comments on, in your social licence hat? We get representations about the effects of truck movements. I was very encouraged by Erin on Friday, who was on the Transport Committee, that there are some moves to engage with the Transport Agency and with the community around truck driver behaviour and that sort of thing. So just any comment on that. And the other thing is, where do you see the future of rail with more rail from the north coming in, bringing logs? How's that all being factored into your business plan and your operations going forward?
Yeah, we do a lot of work, and I think it's got to be a bit of a team effort at a regional level. How do we manage that critical access way in and out of the port? So we have done a lot of work in the past with various different agencies and things around, particularly that HBRC access way, the noise levels and what sort of traffic profile we're expecting to see going forward, and making sure that the various authorities are aware of what we can see coming, and making sure that from an infrastructure perspective there is the right level of funding and support to develop what's going through there, and good sensible town planning going on as well, as to what's going to be surrounding that access way. I mean, there's one thing from a port's perspective, we're not going anywhere, and what we can see coming is coming, and it needs to get there, whether that's on road or on rail. So we also are doing a lot of work with some of the other local authorities and the police and WorkSafe in particular, around truck movements, and making sure that trucks coming into the port are complying with what they need to comply with from a load security, the warrant of fitness, if you like, on the vehicles as well, and making sure that the trucking fraternity are aware of what sort of standards we expect coming into the port, which are high, as well as what sort of behaviour we'd ask them to observe as they go through that area, which is surrounded by residents and things. Rail, on the question of rail, yes, rail does feature strongly on a number of different levels around the desire to get more cargo off roads and onto rail. Obviously, rail are pretty emboldened under this government around the investment that's going in and the desire to do more on rail. I think we're staying close to rail in terms of what their plans and aspirations are and how we can support that. And in fact, my management team were up there last week working with rail around a number of different things. And we'll be looking, depending on that demand that they can generate to bring cargo onto rail, as to what the port needs to develop for to bring more rail onto port as well, and how we can reconfigure the port's rail sidings in conjunction with Key Rail to be able to handle more rail into the port. But honestly, I think that will be a longer term journey with rail, because it will take some time, and a lot of the cargo that comes to Napier Port comes from very close at hand. We talk about over 80% of the cargo comes from within 100 kilometres. So typically, rail is not really an economic position for many of the cargo owners to take to put their cargo through onto the port on rail. However, time will tell and may change that dynamic. That will be driven from a national government level, I believe, rather than necessarily a local government level.
Thank you, Tom.
Sheriff?
You talked about empty boxes. I'm actually more interested in boxes that actually come with content. Biosecurity, you haven't mentioned biosecurity, and what is your annual spend on that? Because of course we've got a very good tool here for either in and out, but this tool also can actually be a great risk for our hinterland.
Yeah, sure. So we do have a lot of focus in the biosecurity area. We have a number of employees that are just specifically employed to focus in on that area, and work with a lot of the local authorities, you know, MPI, MAF and things like that, around what we need to do, and customs as well, to make sure that the region is as adequately protected as we can possibly make it. A lot of consistent training goes in with the team as well annually around awareness. Māori stink bug was probably the most topical one that has been in recent times. And also the other things that we focus on is things like nasties that may be coming in from a marine environment as well on the bottom of vessels or in things like that. So in terms of the actual number that we spend, I couldn't tell you, Jeff, what the number is specifically, but it's certainly a big focus area for the port, and particularly working with those authorities around making sure we're doing everything we can and complying with what they require us to do as a controlled area. And if it's one of those things that if we don't do it right, we can get shut down fairly quickly too. Yeah.
I think it's worth adding as well, Jeff, that we're very rarely the first port of entry. So the ships will generally have cleared quarantine somewhere else before they get to us. The vast majority?
Yeah, it's the import cargo, particularly in the containerised side of things, that is probably the area of risk, most risk, I think. You know, so and we do a limited amount of devanning here, actually on the port for containers itself. A lot of those containers are imported and devanned off-site at other controlled environments. But certainly everything that we do inside the port is as controlled as we can make it.
I hope that you have the same approach as you have with your people, that you put, biosecurity before profits,
yes,
because it's so important for the whole region.
It is. Neil?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just appreciate the new environment you're working in terms of shareholding and shareholder relationships. Obviously, the Regional Council being the biggest shareholder you've got, I'm interested to know how you're looking to take on board some of the aspirations of the shareholder and the major shareholder, and how we can best transact that. And in particular, I'm interested in your approach, for example, to climate change. I didn't see in your presentation on sustainability whether there was a climate change element to it. And just one sort of casual observation is that you're looking to relocate some of your infrastructure and create the new marine environment. But is there a need, for example, to top up your breakwater and elements like that to defend against climate change?
The answer to that is that sustainability framework that we're looking at covers a lot of different areas around a sustainable model, which is also inclusive around topics around climate change. So it'll be an element within our sustainability strategy that we're forming, is how do we, as a port, think about climate change and what we have to do both from an infrastructure perspective, but what other activities can we do to mitigate the effects potentially of climate change as well as a port. In terms of are we topping up our breakwater, we're topping up that breakwater all the time. In terms of the additional concrete blocks and things that go on there, but that's more because slowly that breakwater is always settling. Our master planning exercise looked at some of those topics around sea level rise, for example, and what we need to be able to do. Our new wharf is going to be built to make sure that we're thinking about the resilience factor, but nobody's been able to tell us what the actual number is that we need to build for in terms of how many centimetres or metres of rise we're expecting to see as well. So we can only really design and build for what we know today in that regard. But the answer around the whole climate change piece is it's really going to be encompassed within our sustainability framework and the actions and strategy we take out of that.
And you're looking to measure your carbon footprint, things like that. How are you responding?
As part of being a publicly listed company, it is one of the areas that we need to have to report on. But as I said, the port, from a sustainability perspective, thinks that that's a far more encompassing topic than just reporting on carbon exposure or climate crisis or diversity, etc. We want to take a much broader view of it.
And just an answer, Neil, to your question about the communication piece, there's a formal communication protocol between you as the major shareholder and us as the Napier Port Board, and the informal communication we expect to occur through the two non-independent directors.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, gentlemen. That was a superb presentation and a superb result. You did a great job.
Thank you, Rex. Thanks, Rex.
Now, councillors, I note here that morning tea was scheduled for 11 o'clock without reference to the union delegate, but we're going to receive the report. But do you want to break now for a cup of tea, or do you want to wait till 11 o'clock? Because can we get the financials done in 12 minutes?
I think we can. Okay.
We need to just move to receive the report from the... do we have someone to move to receive the report from the...
I'll do that. I thought that was the case. And thank them for their contribution.
Great. Okay, seconder?
Yep.
Will second. All those in favour?
All right.
All right. So we are, well, we'll do that then, Jess. We'll go and do those financials.
Thank you, Chair. So Bronda's going to join us. Bronda's our new CFO. For those councillors who haven't met Bronda's joined us from Central Hawke's Bay District Council and has replaced Shash. So we are very lucky to have her. She's got lots of experience, which is great. So I'll just give you a brief intro to the paper and then I'll hand over to Bronda for any questions. So this paper is effectively an absence of a Finance Audit and Risk Committee meeting this last quarter of the calendar year, so we thought we would provide a brief financial update, often a financial update for the first quarter spend of the financial year, is a little meaningless in that we don't currently phase our budgets by month. So we prepare an annual budget, and for reporting purposes we just prorata the budget for quarters. Traditionally, and as per this quarter, we look to be effectively significantly underspent for the quarter on a pro rata basis, and that's basically just because of the timing of spend through the year. So generally the first quarter of the year there will obviously be a lot of planning and policy sort of work being done, and a fair chunk of the spend is effectively spent in the last half of the financial year.
Is staffing having an impact on that though?
So the payroll budget is effectively pretty smooth across the year. We do have some additional costs over summer with students that we employ, but the bulk of our sort of contract or external operating budget is unevenly phased throughout the year. It also has effect around the planting season. So the erosion control scheme, for example, would be particularly underspent on a pro rata basis for the first quarter of the year, as that planting season happens over the winter months. So there's a little bit of context around some of those items. We're proposing to bring back to you a 6-month or a half-year set of financials in the new year to the Finance Audit and Risk Committee, which will then come through to Corporate and Strategic. And at that update we'll provide some full year expectations around our operational spend and also our capital budgets for the year. So hopefully that will provide a bit more meaningful commentary in terms of where we expect to see the year end up. But happy to take any questions.
Questions for Jesse or Rhonda?
I've got a question if no one else has.
No?
Mr. Chair, can I go to welcome Rhonda? I haven't had the chance to meet you. I look forward to that.
Thank you.
Can I take you to page 84, the report, the operational statement table, and I'm looking at regulation, consents and compliance, 318K over. That's obviously not a phasing scenario, or is it? What's happening there?
Do you want to?
There's a combination of processes in there. Some of it's around timing of revenue. So it's not, from a revenue input point of view, it's not done at a consistently during the year. So some of that income actually happens at the end of the financial year from a compliance point of view.
So it's a revenue scenario.
So this is the net situation. So it's both expenditure and revenue.
So which is happening? Is it revenue that's the issue?
Revenues.
So within that regulation group, we obviously recover a significant amount of the cost. So 80% of the costs are recoverable within regulation, and the income hasn't been recovered within that first quarter.
So
but it's not indicative of
your expenditure's not running out of control.
No, so expenditure is very much on track. The thing I would say, though, which we will bring forward when we have the 6-month financials, is that we do have a persistent issue with under recovery in the compliance area, and some of the assumptions made in the long-term plan, I think, were overly bullish in terms of our ability to recover as much of the activity occurring in, particularly in the compliance area, than had been anticipated.
And there's interest in transport as well being over. Why has that happened? Is that a revenue or expenditure? Or?
That's something I'll need to bring back. Sorry.
Look, I can make some comments in terms of, I know that in terms of the Go Bus services, just the way that contract works, there is significant price pressure based on the indexing in that contract, and also some employment changes that have been made within the bus drivers' contract overall in terms of introducing brakes. And so this is an area that we know that we will be having to discuss with you early in the new year, just in terms of some cost escalations around the provision of the bus service.
So how do those cost escalations arise in that quarter? What's driving? I mean, your contract's in place, you'll know what your expenditures are. I'm surprised to hear that during that quarter there are issues.
Well, there's ability to move certain costs within that contract, and then there's also simply a number of people that use the bus and the recoveries that we're receiving.
Oh, so it's a revenue side.
Yeah, so it's a revenue side as well. But I expect to be reporting in greater detail on the performance of that contract next year.
Any other questions?
Oh, well, yes, I'll have another go. No one wants to have a crack. Can I just take you to the investment portfolio? And obviously this hasn't had the benefit of a committee process, so and I appreciate it. So that quarter, but what it represents is 1 full year of performance, given the 6, well, not quite, nearly. We've had a year's investment take place. Are there any comment on a full year's result? It's not illustrated here, I know, but but the reality is we've had a full year of calendar year of implementation.
Yeah, so a couple of observations, I guess. I think it's fairly evident that the approach that Mercer took in terms of they're a little more aggressive in terms of their, I guess, investment strategy is that the funds were allocated quite effectively, and that's had a favourable impact in terms of the return that that fund has presented. Jarden, or First New Zealand Capital, as they were named when we appointed them, took a little more conservative approach to the allocation, particularly of equities, and that's had an impact on their result, I think, for the year. But all indications are that this fund will outperform the budgeted 5% for this financial year.
Sure. Obviously, the portfolio will get more scrutiny at another forum. Having said that, though, you'll appreciate that Mercer have a substantially higher exposure to international equities at 29% versus Jarden's at 90%, so a significant exposure to the global economic climate. What is the level of observation, analysis that goes into accepting the level of risk to a particular market like that? Like
so both of the funds comply with the current SIPO, so they're within the SIPO framework. So as far as we're aware, Council are comfortable with the level of risk. The risk appetite is being described through that SIPO, but it's possibly worth bringing that SIPO back through either the Corporate and Strategic Committee for review by Council in terms of your level of comfort with that exposure.
I was just going to ask that. So who set the SIPO? Was it
it's adopted by Council
or full Council?
Well, firstly came through Corporate and Strategic
as a recommendation to full Council.
Can I just make a note, of course? SIPO to me seems to be a long-term strategic view of the world. And I'd be starting to get very nervous if we start making annual reviews of the SIPO without a very good reason. So if we're going to have a review, I'd like to have the review because there's some analysis that says it's time to have a review, and I don't see it yet.
The policy itself states that it should have an annual review in terms of bringing it to Council for a review. So it's not recommending that we make any significant changes, because I agree with you that the investment strategy is a long-term one, and we shouldn't be changing our view on a regular basis, but I think it's worth particularly bringing it back to this Council, given the number of new members that we have, for them to familiarise themselves with it.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just what was the difference, the reason between the Mercer and Jarden? Was that just a diversification?
Yeah, so we went through an RFP process and we shortlisted 4 investment fund managers. I think Council certainly preferred those 2, Mercer and Jarden, and they both actually take quite a different approach to their investment strategy, so it does feel like a nice balance. And we did think at the time it would be interesting to see how the 2 funds performed against each other. So that's something that we can look at, on a semi-regular basis, as the performance of the 2 funds. But again, I'd agree with Councillor Barker's comments that both funds are set up to in terms of a long-term investment. So I wouldn't want to encourage sort of making hasty adjustments to the strategy there. But it's worth keeping an eye on it.
I just respond also to that. To be fair to say that both of them presented very strongly to Council, and we had a long, lengthy debate trying to figure out which one was better than the other. In the end, we couldn't. So we decided we'd do a little bit of like 2-boat testing. We'd take, half and half each to see which they were, because they had 2 entirely different strategies. And my view is I think we should stick with that, because while one at the moment is running ahead because of the nature of its profile as investment, you could easily see a time when the global economy changed and the other would come to the fore. So we've got a fund set up for a particular climate and doing really well. Another time it will shift around. So I wouldn't want to put all our money on one horse here. I think we've actually got a really good structure here. I'm pleased to see it's working well. And the other thing for me is actually achieving better than what we said it was our benchmark. So we're ahead of the game. So I think we've done pretty well. I'm very pleased with this. I think it's really good.
I'm happy to move the report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll move it, and you'll second it.
I'll second it.
Do you wish to speak further?
Well, yes, Mr. Chair, I do, and I take. I hope Councillor Barker's commentary isn't a reflection of a desire to somehow mess with what we've currently got. I think what we've got, yes, we've achieved the benchmark, and that's a great result. But also, our strategy to have two fund holders is working in my mind. You'll note the better performance of Mercer, but at the same token, there's a high level of exposure to international markets. So, but we've covered our bases by having a more conservative approach from Mercer, and I think we're achieving a balance, and that can turn on a turn tomorrow quite easily with an upset to the markets. The Dow Jones has never been higher, at 26,000 or something. It's enormous. So what we've got is, my view, a prudent approach. Nevertheless, I think it's important for the council, particularly through the Audit and Finance Committee, is to keep an eye on the balance and to be continuously asking the investors about their strategy to make sure that at least we've got line of sight on it. So I think we've got the balance right, and I think we're going in the right direction.
Thank you, Rick. You don't want any further comment? Anyone else want to comment on that? I think Breeze is doing pretty well, and we've got that right. I endorse Councillor Curtin's
Just
comments.
make one comment, is that I think it's worthwhile reflecting that this council is in a very fortunate position. Its balance sheet is stronger than it's ever been. The port shares, although we only have 55% of the port now, our port shares are at a value which is equal or stronger than what it was when we had 100%. In addition to this, we've got a strong cash investment into these diversified portfolios, and we've got control of our finances in a way which we've never had at the time that I've been here. And while we've got a very strong balance sheet, the council needs to keep in its mind how we leverage off that to do good works for this region. This is not just to have the money to sit on. This is for us to do things with. So I just want to leave that thought in people's mind. We're not doing this for the end in itself. It's to do other things. So.
Thank you, Rick. Okay, we have a move and a seconder for the recommendation to receive this report. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Okay, we have a minor. I think I'll come back and do them. We'll stop for a cup of tea now.
Yep. Very good decision. Wise chairmanship.